critics would agree that it's very, very difficult to make a sequel that outshines the original. Not impossible, just rare to come by. The sequels to the Lovecraft classic The Re-Animator come nowhere close. Bride of Re-Animator, which came out 5 years after the original, is a blatant rip-off of Bride of Frankenstein. Plain and simple. This sequel's story starts with Dr. Hill's floaty head giving a Bond villain speech about he'll make Herbert West pay for chopping his head off. We then cut to South America, where according to all this exposition text on the screen, Herbert and Dan have snuck off to intern as wartime doctors. Herbert's looking nicely recovered. In any case, Herbert and Dan are still experimenting with bringing corpses back to life. All hell breaks loose, and suddenly it looks like South America isn't the safest place to be anymore. So Dan gets shanked, and Herbert blasts their way out of the war zone. Oh, that reminds me. None of this should be happening. None of this should be fucking happening. Dr. Hill's head was squashed and thrown against a goddamn wall. His body exploded and guts flew out. Herbert West is dead. Dan Kane should be in jail. There were zombies and deadly gas filling a college at the end of the first movie. How? How? Herbert West should not be opening your fucking movie by playing pow pow shoot 'em up like he's goddamn Rambo. So Dan and Herbert just go back to Miskatonic without any issues at all, apparently, and just go back to being doctors. Seriously, they don't even try to disguise the fact that they're the same guys who murdered the dean, top professor, and the dean's daughter, and countless others. At least Peter Cushing grew a mustache at the end of that one Frankenstein sequel. So now Herbert's reanimation system has something to do with lizard parts involved and stringing arms and legs together instead of trying to jumpstart the system. I don't know. The most exciting part of this sequel? A lot of vaginas in it. That's it. That's the highlight. An Austin Powers actress should not be the shining moment of your H.P. Lovecraft film.
Don't let the little head rule the big head, Dan.
So Dan and Herbert attempt to rebuild Meg Halsey via Frankenhooker and bring her back to life. And as you can see, the lady they put together is pretty close. The only thing they were missing is goddamn everything. This thing isn't even close. So yeah, in summation, Dan's an idiot in this one, Herbert is a douche, there's all these new characters that don't act like any rational human would, and it strays way from the original source material and is just a mess and it sucks and I'm done with it.
Blasphemy? Before what God? A God repulsed by the miserable humanity he created in his own image? I will not be shackled by the failures of your God. The only blasphemy is to wallow in insignificance. I have taken refuse in your God's failures, and I have triumphed. There is my creation.
13 years later, Beyond Re-Animator came out, and interestingly enough, it's beyond terrible. So we start out with Herbert West being caught in the act and incarcerated for playing God once again. Now what's interesting about this opening scene is that at the end of Bride of Re-Animator, we see Herbert die again. It's kind of becoming the elephant in the room at this point. Can't really feel the tension of how do we bring the dead back, when the answer is apparently forget they're dead and continue writing them as a character. So for some unexplained reason, Herbert West isn't given the death penalty and is stuck in prison for 13 years instead. Dan, whom we never see in this, apparently turned him into the government after the second film. Now, because Jeffrey Combs is the only returning actor in this film, we quickly get acquainted with a slew of new characters, including Dumb Guard and New Doctor, the Warden, the only woman in this film, and all of the generic, mostly racist inmates. So Herbert gets a slip for new work duty and begins working with a new prison doctor, Howard Phillips. See what you did there, movie? Who reveals pretty quickly that he was the kid who we saw pick up the syringe of reagent at the start of the film. So West and Phillips immediately try it out on a newly dead inmate who comes back to life and goes ape. The warden's pee-pee gets pinched, and the film quickly moves to Phillips and the interviewer lady jumping right into a romantic relationship. Then the film sprints to Herbert and Phillips remaking reagent in the prison lab. So now the interviewer lady is trying to put together an investigation about West. West and Phillips are falling back into the same science habits, and all hell breaks loose. The warden gets his ear bitten off, kills one of the inmates, murders the interviewer lady, and Phillips shows that he's a terrible actor.
No!
They reanimate her, kill the warden, steal his soul, put it into her, there's a riot in the jail, it's a fucking mess. Yeah, you heard me right, by the way. Herbert West and his partner can now capture people's electricity, soul, essence to transfer to another body. Now, I've read a fair share of Lovecraft literature, and nowhere does it give a detailed look at whatever electricity, bottle, soul, reanimation, bullshit that this movie is trying to throw at us. So the warden is brought back with a rat soul, the interviewer lady now has a murderous streak, and an inmate doing a terrible Tommy Chong impression steals a reagent to shoot up with. Because jail. I don't think Lovecraft was really into rat men when he was brainstorming sci-fi story ideas. Okay, so there's the rat with the dude's face in the witch house story, but nevertheless, that doesn't excuse rat warden with boners. So how does this train wreck end? The warden gets his little mouse bitten off, the interviewer is a full-blown psychomaniac now, and Herbert sneaks out the back, leaving a crumbling riot, and Phillips holding the bag. So what's the big problem with these last two Lovecraft films? They're nothing like the original. They're too campy, and especially in the final sequel, they're not scary in the slightest. The first one balanced the two genres, and it's a classic because of it. These other two are just messes that rip off of other films. So after the third film fizzled out in 2003, there were 3 attempts at sequels that all were killed off prematurely. Since then, we've had somewhat of a resurgence in Lovecraft projects. After Beyond Re-Animator, we had 3 different Herbert West comic book series, a stage adaptation, t-shirts, figures, and even an adult film parody. I'll be honest here, it may not be the sexiest thing ever made, and it's more funny than anything else, but I consider it much more of a compliment to the original story than the subsequent sequels were. So in summation, we're just scratching the surface with the potential of this character that only appeared in one Lovecraft story. As a final rundown of recommendations here, definitely check out the original movie. In terms of comic books, Army of Darkness vs. Re-Animator was fantastic, and for a good laugh, definitely track down Re-Penetrator. Until next time, I'm Zach Romero.
Lose something?
She changed. You were wrong. She changed.
It was a theory.